For the most updated version of the Glyphs RPG blueprint, tokens, accessories and resources, please visit www.glyphsrpg.com. Also visit 2ddice.com for our internationally popular D20 RPG coins and our other masterful coin works.
Let's get into chapter 23, entities. Okay, so monsters, creatures, you know, all these wild beings that we can conjure up in our minds. Okay, so what are we talking about when we say that? So entities, okay, things for you to kill, and more importantly, things that can easily kill your PCs. Okay, right? We've talked about having the sense of ever impending danger in any session. Okay, so that's what we're going to be accomplishing today in this chapter. So as we get into the chapter, we're going to look at things. First of all, we're going to look at metrics. Okay, so how we look at monsters, how we categorize them, okay, and all that, how we create hit points, facts, what we look at. Okay, then we're going to look at entity types. So in Glyphs, there are several different ways we categorize them, okay, by their overall types. Okay, then we're going to have some fun. We're going to create a monster from scratch, and then finally we're going to play with a little bit of random gen as well to give you some ideas of how to create some monsters randomly using clues given to you by the glyphs on the token. So let's get started. Okay, so page 386 and 387, we're going to talk about entity metrics. Okay, so what do we look at here for what I consider important parts of monster creation? Okay, so I'm just going to skim over these real quick. Okay, take your time and read it at your leisure. Okay, so we're going to talk about senses. Okay, senses are very important because that can have a very big impact on how the monster can perceive your players in their territory. So very important to consider that. Okay, so that's something I'm starting off with here. Okay, attributes. Okay, pretty self-explanatory. Modifiers, same thing. Okay, random actions. Let's look at that. Now, when we create a monster, you know, it's very nice to have an architect who can control every aspect of the monster and think for the monster itself, right? But we want to give the monster, the entity, a sense of its own independence, right? This thing should be able to act on its own. So we're going to do that here by creating random actions for our creatures as we make them. So we'll talk about that later, but just want to point that out real quick. How a creature acts randomly. Okay, how do we do that with the token? Okay, attacks and actions, obviously very important. So how does a monster attack its victims? Okay, what other actions can it do in combat, right? Any latent abilities that it has, so skills, powers, techniques. Okay, endowments especially can be very important. So very natural type abilities that belong to the creature just by being for what it is, right? We know what endowments are. Okay, let's scroll down here. Okay, page 387. We're going to look here at armor. So armor. Now, most monsters are not going to have suits of armor on them, right? Some of the humanoids might and stuff, but armor generally means, you know, things like exoskeletons. So, you know, you'll have some creatures that have very special tissue. Their skin is very tough, or they may have an exoskeletal shell that functions like armor, right? That's what we're talking about here. So that's why it's nice to have the armor chart on hand in case you need to refer to it if you're creating that type of creature. Okay, then we have polarity. Now polarity, we have 1 through 7, just like we're used to seeing with the token. So once again, your token has your polarity glyphs here, right? See those here. So for monsters, polarity will have a big impact on how they attack or maybe not attack an incoming party member. So just look over these real quick to give you an idea of how they're likely to behave if encountered. Okay, because their polarity can have an impact on that. Just because it's big and scary looking doesn't necessarily mean it's going to attack on sight. Okay, or vice versa. The same could be said about something tall and small and very innocent looking. Okay, we got to know what's going on inside its head and what its disposition is. That's what that talks about there. Okay, size and movement. Okay, so an entity size has a big effect on the amount of distance it can cover, in feet per instant, like we do in combat, right? Also, I want to point out that the result should be clearly designated if movement can occur over land, water, in the air, or in space. I mean, that's kind of an odd one to calculate because everything's a vacuum in space, but it is there for you if you want to use it. So here's some things to consider. Okay, and here you will see different size values on its multipliers. Okay, so basically, if we're looking at that for size and movement, what you want to consider, and it says it right here, an entity's default movement rank, okay, over land, okay, by default, it's calculated by taking its speed modifier, okay, so whatever you have your speed modifier value, and you simply multiply it by the values that are listed here, okay, and that gives you its moving speed depending on what surface it's on. So for land, in most cases, it's going to be simply speed, okay, for most creatures. So sizes triple S through medium, you'll see here, are multiplied by 1. Okay, x1s. That's pretty self-explanatory. So a large creature would have its speed value, its speed rank multiplied by 2, and so forth. And then see here, you see the different types of surfaces that we're talking about. Just do your math there, and that's how you come up with that. Very simple mathematics. Okay. Now let's talk about next page. So page 389, we're entity, no, wait, hold on. I'm sorry, we are in page 388. Where am I going here? I'm getting ahead of myself once again. Too much coffee today, but I guess there's no such thing as too much coffee in our line of work, right? So, okay, structure and LHP. Okay, very important section here. So this page on page 388, this is how we come up with our hit points for our monsters, right? Now, most of you would know by now that regular player characters don't have a lot of hit points, okay? In most cases, they're going to default to the 2 for tissue, 4 for skeleton, and 1 for vitals, right? Like we've talked about, that configuration is pretty standard in the humanoid, but when we talk about monsters, we have to make them more threatening, okay? They're bigger, they're stronger, they're tougher, they're meaner, and they're out to kill you, right? So we have to make them harder to kill, and we do that by giving them more localized hit points, more LHP, in tissue, skeleton, and vitals, okay? So to the left here, you have one section of numbers, and to the right here, you have another section. So let's talk about that for a second. So when we create hit points, there's a number of different ways you could approach it depending on what you're creating and what you think makes the most sense for that creature. Every creature should be seen independently. There is no one size fits all, okay? That's my approach. So the first method that I consider is static LHP. Okay, so this left chart here represents static LHP. So basically these values are already there for you. Just plug and play. I've already done the legwork for you right here. So how do we read this? So let's say for tissue, let's say you have a medium creature. Say all the sizes are right there for you, from triple S all the way to triple L. Okay, so let's say I have a medium creature, and let's say I want to describe his tissue as resilient. So very tough, resilient tissue versus average tissue. So average tissue, the average person would have 2 hit points, but it's resilient, and I'm looking for medium. Okay, so guess what? That has 10 LHP worth of hit points if that tissue is resilient, okay? So that's all you do, just assign it like that. So for skeleton, let's say I have a medium-sized creature with an average skeletal structure, okay, right there. So an average skeleton, that's 4, okay? Let's say that same creature has a very fragile skeleton. So maybe they have tough tissue, but internally their skeleton's very fragile for whatever reason. It's made of glass or something, I don't know. Come up with your own, but that if it's fragile, it would be 2 LHP. So these numbers here make perfect sense based on what we're trying to denote here. So vitals, okay, the weakest, obviously, because they're vital organs, okay? So once again, you have your creature sizes and different LHP values depending on how fragile or resilient it is. So that's how we read this here. It's up to you how you plug in your LHP numbers for your monsters, but it is there for your reference, okay? So on your right is a second approach, okay? That's the randomized portion. So let's say you don't want a static number for every time you create creatures, because after a while it could become a little bit repetitive. I personally think this is a very balanced approach. I do like this a lot. It takes a lot of time. But if you're very much into randomizing everything, this is a way to go here, okay? So here, just now the numbers are kind of small, I know that, and I ran out of space. I have very little space to work with, but they're very legible. Just zoom in a little bit if you have to, but it's right there. So same principle applies, except we're going to be randomizing instead of just looking at static numbers. So as an example, okay, that is annoying. I hate Windows 10. Give me a minute. All right. I miss my Windows 7. Anyways, so let's look as an example at skeleton. I want to randomize a monster's skeleton hit points, okay? Now, some of these you're not going to be able to randomize because they're so weak or so insignificant. Some of those are left blanked out for a reason, okay? Common sense. But let's say I want to randomize this guy's skeleton, and let's say he's a large creature, okay? Let's say he has an average skeleton. So I'm looking at skeleton, large, average, right there. So in this case, we're simply going to randomize using the token. So if it's a number sign, remember, you just spin and read your digits, and that tells you your hit points. If there's a multiplier in there, just multiply the result you get here by the number it tells you. So this large creature has an average skeleton. So you spin your digits, and let's say it lands on 7. Okay, as it's, again, very clinical, I'm just showing you. So let's say it lands on 7. It's a number 2 in that example, so you multiply that by 2, so it's 14. So that skeleton would have 14 hit points. That's all we're doing here. Very simple math, okay? So that's a very nice approach if you want to change things up and buff up your creatures a little bit, okay? Now, a third approach you'll see here is called material LHP. So if you need to base your monster's hit points on a material, okay, that's what that is there for. So if you have, a synthetic, monster, or an android, or something with an exoskeleton, something that you want to imitate a material from, right? That's another way to do that. Simply refer to the armor chart, okay, in the armor chapter. It's also on the website at glyphsrpg.com in the armor section. All the default armor values are there, and simply just take the AHP from whatever material and resilience you're using and plug it in, okay? In fact, we're going to be doing that later on for the creature, and it's a surprise. I don't want to ruin it just yet. We're going to use that a little bit later on in the tutorial of the creature that I'm going to make for you, okay? So 3 approaches. Use what's best for you. They all work very well, though, okay? So now let's move on here. Entity metrics 3. Okay, so page 389. Actually 3 very important figures to talk about. Okay, so all the stuff that we've talked about so far, a lot of it's probably going to be very familiar to you. They're all just basic monster mechanics, right? But this is going to start getting a little bit different for some of you. So bit value, let's talk about that. We got bit value, EP, right? And threat modifier, very important things. So bit value, what is that? So an entity's bit value is the amount of monetary reward that you obtain after you kill the entity, okay? So it's up to you, the architect, how you award that, but how do we know how much to give, right? That's what we're trying to give by this number. So bit value is simply calculated by multiplying or dividing the entity's threat modifier by its bit size rank, okay? So threat modifier we're going to talk about here shortly, but it's a static number that we're going to come up with here shortly. But all you do is simply multiply the threat modifier, which we're going to talk about here, by its bit size rank. So as an example here, let's say I have a small creature, right? So you're going to multiply or divide, depending how big or small. So let's say it's a small creature, right? Let's say it has a threat modifier of 10, which is unlikely, but it could happen. You simply divide that by 2, and it's 5. Now, once you get that number, again, very elementary math that we're doing here, right? Then you look at here, in this section here. If that number falls between here, let's say 5, right? I just got 5. Okay, 1 to 5 comes off. It gives me, let's see, a moderate. So if the value that I just created is 1 to 5, which it was just 5, the reward is moderate. So how do we know it's moderate? You simply spend the token, and we've talked about that, the values in wealth. So moderate value is talked about in the wealth chapter. So that's how we come up with that. Simply spend the token enough times and come up with your digits, and that's your reward in bits. Once you get your bits, simply convert it into your currency. It's that simple, okay? Let's say using this formula, my number for whatever lands in, 17, right? Okay? Totally. My total bit value is 17. Then guess what? That's exclusive. So exclusive, a lot of token spins, right? Cross them, come up with your bits, and so forth. So that's the amount of treasure awarded. So that's all we do here. Very simple math. Just take a look. This is something very nice to reference during the experience process. Okay? So EP. How much EP a monster has. It's not just a number we just come up out of the blue. Okay, I know a lot of games do that, where they have just random stats. They just make things up based on what they think. Okay, here there's a mathematical way we approach that to try to balance things out as much as possible. Okay, so EP. Okay, so an EP is simply calculated by its threat modifier score. Okay, so you multiply that by its base EP being size. Okay, now, so once again, once you have your threat modifier score, we're going to talk about that shortly. Okay, simply multiply that by one of these figures here. It's very simple. Okay, very basic math. Okay, now let's see. If you notice here, it tells you here, right? So here it shows you the chart. So one thing I want to point out now, it's not an error that these are in descending order. Okay, so I did that intentionally. You may disagree with me. You may want to flip these around, okay? But I think it makes sense from a balancing standpoint, because here, think about it. You have triple S to triple L. So tiniest creature through the largest creature, right? You notice the values get smaller. You would think maybe the bigger the creature, the more EP, right? Well, you could take that approach, and it certainly makes sense. But I like to reason that if something's smaller, maybe there's something else to compensate for that lack of size. So maybe more power behind it, more etheric power. So that was my reasoning for coming up with this. So the tiniest creature, the triple S as an example, has the highest multiplier here. Okay, so again, if you're, as the architect, you may disagree with me on that. Simply invert them, but I think personally this makes sense, so that's the way I'm keeping it. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out there. So now let's talk about the threat modifier, okay? And I'm going to show you exactly how to get that during the tutorial section that we create our monster, okay? There's a process that I came up with to help simplify the one that's here in the book using an Excel spreadsheet, okay? It's going to save you some time. So we're just going to do that in the interest of time because there's so little of it. So threat modifier. What is a threat modifier, okay? Basically, think of it as something that functions as an indication of danger, okay, as well as an EXP multiplier, okay? So the threat mod, okay, for short, threat mod is basically a way of determining how much EXP that needs to be awarded to a character that defeats the entity, okay? Okay? So while it's not necessarily intended to be construed as a conventional level per se, okay, I honestly think that it should be regarded as a way to rank an entity based on the level of threat that it poses. So something with a higher threat modifier, no matter what size it is, okay, is likely to wreak a lot more havoc on your party and probably going to be a lot harder to kill in most cases, okay? You're going to see that here shortly, what we're about to make, and you're going to see why that is, okay? Now, that's also intended to help, architects balance the encounters out. You don't want fledgling tier 1 characters going against something with a high threat modifier, right? They're probably going to die. So that's what this is fun here for. So it is sort of like a monster level, okay? Now, let's talk about here. Now, here you'll see, and when you're dealing with NPCs, okay, so for the purpose of calculating experience when you're dealing with NPCs, so one of your players kills an NPC, right? Or each other for that matter, I will point that out. If they're fighting each other and they kill each other, then the threat modifier should be seen as the combat level. So if you got another player, they don't have a threat mod because they're not monsters, right? So just treat their combat level as the threat modifier, because it is essentially the same function, right? We're assessing somebody's level of threat and somebody's combat readiness, okay? So that's what we're going to look at here. And again, when we create, you'll see here. So put 390, it outlines the process how to do it manually, okay? So if you're interested in doing it manually, 390 will show you exactly how to do it using the one of the default monsters in here as an example. Shows you how to calculate it. A lot of number crunching, okay? Now, again, there's a lot of math involved for a reason, because a lot of things are taken into account, okay? So I'm just going to skim over this real quick, and then we're going to go look at the different types of creatures. So what is factored into a threat modifier, okay? So here we got an example, the Glyphs creature that we're going to look at. So we want to look at modifiers. We want to look at attacks. So how does this guy attack? How dangerous is he attack-wise? Do they have any techniques? So again, we all know techniques can be pretty good game changers in and of themselves. Powers, and how powerful are those powers? Endowments, any other abilities? LHP, so it's hit points, any armor, if it's wearing any. And we're going to factor all those things in to a number to give you a pretty good snapshot of how dangerous that creature is. That's the purpose behind the threat modifier. The more dangerous the creature you fight, the more experience you are awarded, right? That's the logic matched up with the right encounter. So that pretty much the entity metrics process. So now let's skim over real quick to the different types of entities that we recognize. Briefly skim over the different spectrum of entities that we recognize in here. Now, each entity class is basically designed to give you a general idea of the characteristics each type of monster you'll create will have. So these are just general categories, and it's up to you what you create from these types of how you rank them, okay? So I'm just going to skim over real quick, and then we're going to get into the fun stuff, okay? So first we have humanoids, okay? So most of your NPCs are going to be humanoids, and most, if not all, your PCs are going to be humanoids, right? So as far as monsters go, you know, orcs, ogres, you know, things of that nature are going to fall in the humanoid category. So pretty much anything with 2 legs, 2 arms, a head, right? You know, limited intelligence to very intelligent, right? So humanoids. As an example here, I have the Orcish Grazer, okay? And here is his stat block. And each one of these is going to have a brief description and a stat block. So before we get on further, take your time, if you haven't already. Be familiar with the different types of entities, and then just take a look at the stat blocks at your convenience. Basically to kind of give you an idea of how the metrics we've talked about fit into this, okay? I'm not going to spend all the time just showing you each one of these. That's pointless. I'd rather spend time showing you how to make one from scratch. So that's all this says here. So this tells you what the Orcish Grazer can do, you know, how it behaves, its movement, its stats, its attacks, all that good stuff is right there, okay? So same thing can be said with the rest of the classes. So beasts, okay? So a lot of your larger monsters, dragons, you know, bugbears, you know, all the crazy stuff out there is going to fall into this category. So more animalistic type creatures are going to fall into this category. And as an example, I created a pretty nasty nightshade dragon. Okay, here's his description, and there is his stat block. Okay, so take a look at that at your convenience. Next we have undead. Okay, pretty self-explanatory. I don't need to go in that. Vampires, zombies, right? Liches, all that awesome stuff. Okay. Then we've got, as an example, we have a default yard zombie, so a very basic zombie as an example. Okay, there's his stat block. Okay, abominables. Okay, so abominables, the most disfigured, you know, grotesque creatures. A lot of them don't have any quantifiable forms, so blobs, gelatins, puddings, things of that nature can go in there, or something that's just really disfigured and can't really be classed as anything would fall into this category. That's the best way I can describe it. So this is your unknown category in some cases. Okay, so in here I have an EMP slime, so a very large slime creature that has an electrical type of attack, right? Okay, so dangerous against synthetics. Okay, there's a stat block. Okay, elementals. Okay, so anything that's composed of or has qualities of an elemental nature, right? Okay, so fire elementals, earth elementals, water, crystal, shadow, anything you can. Okay, so that's pretty much it. So here I have a really cool grass elemental. I call the Grasassin. Okay, so these guys pretty intimidating, and I actually used one of these guys and punched somebody's face off in a battle. Okay, fledgling tier 1 character, went up against him. He wasn't paying attention to his surroundings. This thing was clearly bigger than him, and he wanted to go toe to toe. And yeah, it didn't go too well for him. It was actually a pretty good story behind that. But anyways, there's his stat block. Okay, synthetics. So cyborgs, robots, anything pretty much artificial, right, is going to fall into this category. So drones, anything like that whatsoever is going to fall in here. So any artificial life, right, synthetics. Okay, so here the quad fire is basically a police drone, right? Okay, describes you how it behaves, what it is. Same thing here, stat block. Okay, planers. Okay, so some of the most vicious type of entities out there. So demons, otherworldly monsters, right? Ghosts, specters, some of them, more or less quantifiable creatures out there, more planar in nature. Demigods, spirit gods, angels, anything like that would fall into the planar category. Okay, so take a look at this here. It's going to tell you more about it here. Okay, here, instead of going with the typical demon like everybody else would to categorize that, I used a cat mare, say something I created. It's basically a demonic cat that breathes hellfire on unsuspecting victims when they sleep, and it also induces nightmare. People who are sleeping in the same house together all have nightmares while this thing's in its cat form. Okay, so pretty nasty guy. Take a look at his stat block there if you need to use them for your game. Okay, so what we're talking about here are any sentient species of natural growth. It's like trees, bushes, plants, okay, all that, okay? But in Monster World, okay, we're talking about things that can kill you. So we're talking about things for floor entities, things with innate intelligence of any kind, okay, higher awareness than regular plants, the ability to move somehow, okay, or attack. So that's up to you how that works. So make them dangerous to your travelers, okay? Don't make them touch the pretty pink flowers, okay? Or the briar patch. Don't let them go through the briar patch. You see what happens here, okay? So the red briar, that's an example of a flora entity, okay? There's the red briar's stat block. And finally, fauna, okay? So animals. Enough said. Fauna are just regular animals. So even regular animals can kill you. I mean, a tiger or a lion is technically still a regular animal, so so is a tiny little French poodle. So it's up to you how you use them in your game. This is just the way we categorize them here. So again, we have a Frey wolf. Okay, so a pretty nasty wolf here. So there's his stat block. Okay, so that's pretty much it. So again, take your time, read through the book, and when you go to build a monster for yourself for the first time, just take your time with a chapter, especially in the metrics portion, and be comfortable understanding the metrics, especially threat modifier, bit value, and ether points, and everything else is just intuitive. Just how does it attack, how does it behave? That's up to you to figure out, and that's, to be honest with you, that's probably the funnest part. So we've looked at metrics. We've very quickly skimmed over the different types of creatures we looked at, okay? It's up to you, like I said, to be familiar with the stat blocks and how it works. I've already kind of shown you. But now, honestly, I want to get into the fun part. I want to make a monster from scratch. I have already done that over here to prepare for the tutorial, so it's very clinical in nature in the interest of time. But I'm going to actually have you look over my shoulder here because I'm going to be using some templates in order to save time. So stay with me. Let's have a little bit of fun. So we are going to be creating a monster, an entity from scratch, and based on all the stuff that we've just talked about in this chapter. Now, for clinical purposes, we're going to be using a very familiar monster that most of us love. I know this is one of my personal beloved creatures of all time, and I know those of us in role-playing love aliens. So, for the sake of this tutorial, I want to use something that we're all familiar with, and we will be making a xenomorph warrior from scratch using the metrics and the processes that we have in the entity chapter. So you'll see here I'm using an Excel spreadsheet. Now, I highly recommend that you do the same. Okay, it's going to save you time. It's very clean, very simple presentation. It's very easy to print. Okay, I have my copy here, very cleanly laid out, so you can just print it on a very low setting on a fast draft quality. Make sure when you print it that you're fitting to the page and you're centering it, and it'll come out nice and clean, just like this. You can refer to. Personally, I don't even use paper. I just have a document here that's got all my my nasty creatures over here by tab. But if you like paper, then simply print it and have it as your side for reference. So I already have mine made here. In the interest of time, I'm just going to show you how I came about it here. So we're going to be using the Excel spreadsheet here for the entity stat block. Now, where do we find that? Let me show you real quick. So glyphsrpg.com, that's our website. Very valuable resource. Okay, so let's go here, glyphsrpg.com. Now, sheets and resources. That tab is very important for architects, okay? So that tab is going to have all your character sheets here by race type, okay? All the character sheet pages. Now, down here, you have an Omni grid if you need to print it in case you don't need to buy a board, action grids, okay? The quick rules, references, all that. But for this tutorial, I'm going to be using the entity stat block template. So you'll see here different Excel sheets. We're also going to be using the threat mod calculator in a minute as well. So this one here is the one that I'm using, so the entity stat block template, okay? So that's why I'm using that, okay? So let's take a look at it here. So first, I've already put the picture in of the xenomorph in here, gave it a name real quick, right? That should be step one. Now, us like to get numbers and stats out of the way, okay? That's how I like to get it done. So when I'm creating a creature from scratch, or in this case modding one just for clinical purposes, I like to think of what this creature can do, right, attribute wise. So how dangerous and strong and smart is this guy? So this is what I've come up with based on my own assessments. You may feel otherwise. You can tweak it as you see fit. Again, it's subjective, but this is what I came up with. So for strength, I gave him a 6. Okay, for constitution, gave him a 12. And I'm going to show you how I got these numbers. So 4 for finesse, obviously a 0 for appearance, health, he's in good health for his species. IQ, now IQ, that's been debated among fans of the film, okay, for quite a while. How smart are these guys? They are a little bit more animalistic than other species out there, but I think for their kind, they are reasonably intelligent. So let's just say they're average intelligence. So I gave them a 2, right? If you're pound for pound, I guess you could say. So reaction, they're very quick. So that's an 8. Memory is 3. I'm still sick. I do apologize. Focus is 4. Okay, sanity is 0. Okay, so these guys are nasty killing machines, but they are the perfect organism, right? That doesn't mean they have to be all there in the head. Okay, so wisdom 3, force 3, okay, will 4, charisma 0, and luck 1. So these are the attributes that I gave it. Now I want you to pay attention to something real quick that I did. Now, all I did is plug in the numbers that I came up with after I thought about it. But you'll see here on the spreadsheet, you'll see the multipliers here in parentheses. That means what kind of metric it is. Is it even, wild, epic, or augmented? So if you'll notice in the attributes chapter, we've talked about that way earlier on. And each prime attribute has a multiplier attributed to it. That's what this means here. So strength of 6 is actually a strength of 2 multiplied by 3, because the xenomorph, from my understanding, has augmented physical attributes, right? So he gets a multiplier of 3 there. That's what that means. So 2 times. So for a creature, he's about average strength, but for us, he's very strong, right? So same for Constitution, okay? But you notice I only did that for the prime attributes. So the same thing carries over, just like we did with player characters, right? So that's how I got these. Another thing I want you to notice here. Now, because coming up with your modifiers involves very basic math, simply averaging numbers together, I know that during the creation process we want to save as much time as possible. So I use my very elementary Excel skills to average them for you. So as you enter your attributes here, it's automatically going to calculate the modifiers for you. So your modifiers are right down here. So attributes are here, modifiers are here. So that's already done for you. So this guy is pretty vicious, okay? He has a 10 speed. So on land, he can move 10 feet in 1 instant, okay? Now, I know other systems have different ways of looking at movement speed and glyphs. That's pretty damn fast. 6 for initiative, okay? Evade, he has a 7.5. Now, another thing I want you to notice, my Excel skills are very elementary. I do it the best I can, but I'm one guy, and Excel and formulas are not my strong point. So other you folks out there are way better than me. That's great. Redesign it if you want to, if that works for you. But I want you to see something. Anything here that's got a 0.5, just round up to the next number, okay? So evade, a 7.5, in this spreadsheet is actually an 8. So he's got an 8 for evade. So this guy is very fast, okay? So that's out of the way. Now let's take a look at his attributes here for his hit points and stuff, okay? So for blood, he's a medium-sized creature. He gets 12 units of acidic blood. Now, for tissue and vitals, or skeleton, I want to put something here. 28. Right? Awfully strong. Now, why did I come up with that number? Okay, so hold on. Let's do vitals 4. So for vitals, I just used the regular table that we've talked about. Okay, we're not going to do EP and that yet. We're going to talk about EP shortly, how I get that. Okay, so let's just put size. Size, he's roughly 7.5 feet tall, right? We've seen the movies. So he's still technically a medium creature. Not a big, nasty one, but he's still technically a medium creature. So tissue. Why do I have 28? That's a lot of LHP. It's a lot of hit points for a creature, right? So where did I come up with that? So because the xenomorph is known for having a very, very tough, rugged exoskeleton that makes him very hard to kill, right? You've seen people shoot him and go crazy on him, and he's almost indestructible, right? I'm trying to mimic that attribute in this system. So I'm going to beef up his hit points for his tissue and his skeleton. So his exoskeletal frame, right, to make him really hard to kill. So I'm going to look, and again, you may have a different approach to this. That's on you, but I'm going to be treating that more as armor. So, and that shows you in the entity chapter that you can consider that too. In this example, I'm going to consider that because I want this guy to be really hard to kill. Okay, so armor defaults. I'm going to go under the character creation tab on the website, and it's right here. Or you could use your quick gen sheet. It's up to you, whatever you have. So I'm going to look at armor, and I'm going to consider what material is this guy. Obviously, he's extraterrestrial, so it's obviously not going to be gold or copper. So that's why cellular is in here. Cellular is just that. Something organic or similar to organic or alien or, I mean, whatever you want to come up with. I look at that. So right here is 28, okay? So this guy is literally almost the equivalent of having a full set of cellular type armor all over his body, okay? That's how I come up with that, okay? And I'm treating the same thing for his skeleton, okay? So I know the book says to multiply or divide it or whatever, but in this case, I mean, his whole body is basically a killing machine. So in my own case, and again, you may feel otherwise, he gets 28 for tissue and 28 for skeleton. Okay, generally skeleton is twice as strong. You could do that too, but I like these nice and even for this particular creature. That's just my own interpretation. Okay? So let's take a look at its senses. Okay, let's talk about that. So the xenomorph. Okay, vision is 1. Hearing is 3. Smell is 2. Taste is 1. Okay, but there's more to it than that for this guy. So vision is very poor, okay? We've seen the movies. They do have eyes, but they're very poor. They're only for like close range or seeing very basic features. The eyes themselves don't see very well, okay? Hearing is extremely good. Smell is pretty average. Taste, we don't really know exactly, but based on their features, I would say their taste is probably pretty bland. That's my own interpretation. Again, you may feel otherwise, but that's how I'm attributing this. Okay? Now, they're going to compensate for these senses here shortly. We're going to talk about other aspects here. They're going to definitely compensate. So, let's, we got our attributes, we got our modifiers covered, right? His hit points, all that stuff, and his senses. So far, so good. Polarity, let's talk about that real quick before we move on. So, polarity. Basically, he's a running killing machine. He doesn't discriminate at all. He just kills anything. Okay? So he's evil with no purpose. There's no explanation that we know of, right? Not just guarding territory. Very vicious creature, right? So I'm going to say he's nefarious. Okay? So the Xeno, at least from my interpretation, is an equal opportunity hater, right? Let's just say that. All right, now, before I move on, let's take a look at how fast he moves on land. So land, he moves 10 feet in 1 instant. Okay, water, let's talk about that. So water, by the book, you could multiply that or divide that by 2. Or divide that, yeah, to cut that down or increase it, but from what I've observed, and again, this is only observation, he doesn't really move faster in water, but he moves pretty quick in water, right? He still moves very quick in water, but I wouldn't go as far as to say faster, like a fish or something. So for this purpose only, I'm going to give him a 10 as well. So he can move quick on either, about the same. Okay, air is 0 because he doesn't fly. In space, I just default it to 1 because in Glyphs, pretty much everything will be defaulted to 1 if it's floating in space, right? About 1 foot per second, unless you push it or there's a thruster or something. But that's just what I have it defaulted as, okay? But for basically, this is what you're going to be looking at here, unless it's a flying creature. So very quick, very fast, nasty alien, right? So now let's move down here. On the spreadsheet, there's a section for armor. Now, I could have coded him with armor for cellular here, but that's pointless. It's too time consuming, and there's just no need for it when his bodily structure is functioning like armor. So that's why I'm leaving that blank. That is intentional. So let's talk about resistances. What do we know about the Xenomorph warrior? So he's resistant to acid. And I'm just going quick here. Forgive my typos. Okay. So acid can't hurt him that we know of. Poison. Okay, he's okay. One other thing I want to talk about: striking shock damage. So striking shock damage. Now, we know that when we studied armor that somebody's vitals can still be hurt pretty badly if shock value, passes through the armor, right? Well, with the Xenomorph, as far as I'm concerned, you're not so lucky. So you're not going to take this guy out with a Warhammer, most likely. Okay? Hardly unlikely to happen. So the way his vitals were arranged inside, and again, this is only speculation based on observation, they're arranged in such a way and made of such, alien stuff, or whatever you want to call it, that ordinary shock value isn't going to affect it. So no matter how hard you hit this guy armor, you have to destroy his armor in order to hit him, is what I'm trying to say. So that's what he's resistant to. Okay? Weaknesses. Let's talk about, is there a way to kill this guy besides shredding him with a pulse rifle? Yes, there is. So fire, extreme temperature changes, okay, just for short, okay, and ultrasound pulses. So ultrasound paralyze them, not necessarily kill them, but they can paralyze them and confuse them. Fire, okay, they're very afraid of fire. Okay, we've seen that happen a couple times, right? And extreme temperature changes. So from 0 to like -400, like liquid nitrogen, okay? That can also hurt them very badly. So weaknesses, we're talking about double damage or paralysis or other effects. That's what this guy is weak against as far as I'm concerned. Okay, if you see any other ones you can think of, feel free to add them. Because I will be using this in one of my upcoming campaigns where now we're finishing an awesome horror steampunk fantasy mod. But I do want to move on to something else, and I love, I'm a huge fan of the Alien franchise and other stuff, and I think I want to mod that, and we're going to play that for a while. Let's see. So this is going to be an actual creature in play. Okay, anyways, let's talk about abilities. Now, for the sake of time, I've already got that here. I'm just going to copy and paste it in there to show you. Okay, this is already ready because we are limited on time and attention span. So let's copy that. And so abilities, this is your section where you list what he can do besides just attacks. Okay, so let's see. So techniques, even though he wasn't, the Xeno isn't formally trained like we would think, right? Monsters can still have techniques, okay? Natural functions that emulate techniques, I guess you could say, because techniques are game changers, and the way he moves is game changing compared to other monsters. So for techniques, I gave him running strike and executioner. So running strike, you've seen where he's running and screeching and screaming, right? And thrashing around and striking. That's what this does. Okay, we already know what that does. Losing my voice today. Okay, executioner. So these two techniques I thought were appropriate for the Xenomorph warrior. Okay, for endowments. So he has acidic blood, and if for some reason somebody shoots him and it pierces him and it spatters everywhere, then the acidic blood spatter has a range of M3 and inflicts tier 2 of damage if some unlucky bastard's hit by it, right? We've seen that happen. Okay, so thermosense. So this, the alien can sense temperatures. He can detect different fluctuations in temperatures very acutely. So he can detect somebody just by their body heat, right? So very hard to evade this guy or sneak up on him. Very, very tricky to do that. Okay, echolocation screech. Now, there's a lot of us out there that think that part of the screeching and screaming and screeching, shrieking that they do is a form of echolocation to help find their prey and each other. So I put that in there just by speculation and observation. So the screeching echolocation feature. And here we have the exoskeleton that we've talked about into his hit points. It's already implemented there. I would consider that as a natural endowment. So that's why that's listed here. So it's got cellular. I'm treating it as cellular armor with an LHP of 28. And here, the only thing that can damage this Xenomorph is an attack with medium an intensity of 2. So a medium weapon with an intensity of 2. So a 2, what is an intensity 2? We've already learned about this earlier on. So an intensity 2 would be carbon and air as an example. So that's 2 dots, right? So you have to hit at least an intensity 2 or 3 in order to even damage this guy. So Small arms and small weapons aren't going to do a dent. That's why you see him just screaming and running towards these guys with guns, and they're not doing anything, and he just thrashes through them, right? That's what this reflects here. I think it's pretty accurate if you ask me, right? Okay, and finally, we have skills. So skills. What is this guy good at? They're skilled hunters, right? So very sneaky, very silent. They prefer to sneak up on their enemies or ambush them, right? So he's a level 5 in stealth walking. Okay, for Glyphs purposes, we are using skills and techniques that already exist. I think it makes sense. So that's what he can do. Those are his abilities, right? Okay, now before we get to random actions, okay, armor enhancements. Now what do we have for armor enhancements? So he's not wearing any actual armor, but his body basically can withstand any extreme harsh environment. So you can go out there in the vacuum of space, right? Very, very resilient in that regard. Let me just put that in there. Okay, we're not going to do random actions just yet because I want to know how this guy attacks. Okay, so let's have fun here. Let's see. So in the interest of time, I'm simply going to copy and paste what I have here into my new spreadsheet, and then we're going to go over them. So let's see. Just doing this to make sure everything's on the same page here. So let's talk about how this guy attacks, okay? So first, we have the very famous inner jaw attack, right, that emerges from his mouth. We've all seen that a million times, okay? Very powerful attack, okay? His proficiency is +3. My Excel doesn't reflect the plus sign, so it's +3. Okay, so very skilled. Effectiveness is 3, as if he had an effectiveness 3 weapon, so very dangerous. Damage is T2. Range is M1, so he's got to get very up close and personal to use it, okay? So, and the advantage that I gave it is 3. Now, in here is a section to put the description of the attack. You can go into great detail here depending on what monster you're creating. Very good idea. But in my case, it's very simple for the xenomorph. So the inner jaw that we're all familiar with does piercing and tearing damage. So it's going to pierce right through somebody's head, right? So when xenomorphs attack, we all know that one of their preferred method attack is stealth and just coming up from behind somebody and braining somebody, right? So this guy's just standing there smoking a cigarette, and suddenly jaw goes through right through his head, and he gets brained, right? We've seen that. Pretty awesome attack. Insta-kill. That is one of their favorite attacks, okay? So then we have the xenomorph claws, so thrashing about with their claws, right? Razor sharp. Proficiency of 2, effectiveness 2, damage T2, range M2, advantage 1, okay? So claws do tearing property, so they tear as they inflict damage. And finally, we have the tail. So I like to think of the xenomorph's tail more as a spear. That's a warrior's spear, right? That's essentially this type of attack. So the xeno tail, we have a proficiency of 3, +3. Effectiveness of 4, so that's a very heavy type spear that it's attacking with. T5 damage, range M4, so very long attack, okay, barely in the melee range. Got an advantage of 5, so the tail does piercing and cleaving damage depending on how it's attacking, right? So very nasty, almost a ranged attack, okay? Now, that's it for his attacks. Let's talk about his random actions. So if we want to randomize this guy, let me copy it here and paste it in there. So let's see, random actions. So we're going to copy that over. Okay, whatever. It doesn't have to be pretty. I'm just showing you. So random actions. So as we all know, Xenos do prefer to ambush targets from stealth and surprise attacks. So they don't want to go toe to toe. They don't have to. They'd rather just ambush you and surprise, right, and be hidden. So if they do that, they're going to probably prefer to attack with their inner jaw, right, to have an insta kill. We've seen that happen many times, right, in the movies. Pretty cool. But let's say that you're going toe to toe with one for whatever reason. You're that stupid, but let's say you're going toe-to-toe, right? We want to randomize how this guy moves. Now, he's smart enough to probably attack, to use the attack that's in his range in order to, be effective, right? He's not going to shoot his jaw out if he's 10 feet away. That would be stupid. So random in that sense wouldn't work. Let me get some water here. Something's going on here. But let's say you want to randomize how they attack, right? Just to change it up. Just spin your token, right? Just spin it here, pick it up, read your number. So if it falls between 1 and 4, okay, it's an inner jaw. If it falls between 5 and 8, it attacks with its claws. So in this case, I got a 5, so he's attacking with his claws. So that's all you do when we're talking about random actions. So that section is for there. So that's pretty much all there is to it. Again, I know I sound very long-winded. This is a very clinical tutorial. But I want to make sure you understand why I'm getting... I don't want to do that. I want to go here. Let's see. So one more thing to talk about. Very important. Okay. So now we know his attributes, how tough he is, what he can do, all that, right? So now we need... up here, we need to focus on this section here. So ether points, EP size multiplier, we're going to talk about that here. Let's see his threat modifier. So how dangerous is this guy? Let's do threat modifier first. So basically his level. What level is this monster? Okay. So I have a number here, but I'm not going to give it to you without showing you how I got it. Now let's go here to my laptop and open the threat mod. So here on the website you'll see threat mod calculator. You could do it manually. There is a way to do it manually, and it's in the book. I just didn't go over it because it's time consuming. Okay, I want to save time. It's right there for you. So just download that, and there's your threat mod calculator, which I'm going to pull up here. Okay, so threat mod. So how dangerous is the Xenomorph Warrior, right? Let's pull that up here as soon as Excel does its thing. Very slow. Okay. So we've already talked about the different categories that we look at for threat modifier. So all we're going to do in this spreadsheet is simply plug in numbers. Very easy. Okay, it's idiot proof. So let's do this. So here for initiative, we're going to do 6. Okay, for speed, we're going to do 10. For block, okay, even though he's not going to actually block in combat, probably not. That'd be kind of dumb for a xenomorph. He's just going to invade, but the numbers are there for you. Okay, for block, we have a 7. For parry, we have a 6. For evade, we have a 7.5, which means 8. We all know that right now. For impact, so how hard does he hit? It is 5. For hit, it's 4. Endurance, if you're going to count that in, is 8. So pretty nasty guy. So you'll notice here I'm not counting every single modifier. I'm only counting the most important ones as they relate to combat. That's another thing I want you to note here, because you're thinking, oh, he's missing modifiers. No, I'm not. There are only certain ones that we look at when you come up with a threat mod. Okay, attacks. So attacks, you can write the name here. I'm not going to do that in the interest of time. I'm just going to crunch numbers. So his first attack is effectiveness of 3, so the jaw attack, right? Damage is T2, so here you just put 2. Proficiency, he's 3, so very proficient. And you get your total. So 3 times 2 is 6, right? Times 3 is 18. That's all we do here. Okay, it's already averaging in there for you to save you time. Second attack, we got the claws. So effectiveness of 2, proficiency of 2. And damage is also 2, so 2, 2, 2. So 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. And finally here we have the tail. Okay, so it's effectiveness of 4. Okay, so very effective. That can go through pretty much anything, any kind of armor, so better beware of the tail. Damage is T2. No, I'm sorry, T5. So it's 5 damage. Proficiency is 3, so he's very good with that. So 5 times 4 is 20. Times 3 is 60. guess what? Look at that number. That's a pretty nasty number. Techniques. How many techniques does he have? Just count the techniques. That's all you're doing with techniques, because they're all game changers as far as I'm concerned. So he's got 2 techniques, running strike and executioner, right? Powers, he doesn't have any powers, so I'm going to ignore that. Okay, endowments, how many endowments does he have? 1, 2, 3, 4. So acid blood, thermosense, the echolocation, and the exoskeleton. So we'll put 4 there. And here we're LHP. Let's look at LHP. How much LHP does he have? For tissue, 28. For skeleton, same thing. And again, you can do what you want with that, and that's what I think. And vitals is 4. And you see here, it's already averaging it for you. Again, it saves you a lot of time, because that's a very important number you have to know for everything else, and how to match it up with your players. Okay, he's not wearing armor. He is walking armor, basically. So guess what? I've already got the number right here. See, all of this is already averaged for you with this spreadsheet. So very, very handy to have. So 877, we rounded up to 9. So this guy here, the xenomorph, let's see, has a threat mod. So what does that mean? That means you should not be even thinking about fighting this guy unless you're at least a tier 2 character, so a veteran level character. A tier 1 character, meaning combat level 1 through 5, should not try to fight this guy unless there's enough of you and you got the right equipment and a little bit of luck, okay? So he's a threat level of 9, so pretty vicious, okay? Now let's look at bit value. So managed to survive and kill a xenomorph warrior, okay? So bit value, let's take a look at that. So bit value is a 9. Now why do I have 9? Why did I come up with that? So let's take a look here in the book. Let me just show you how all this goes into practice before my voice is completely gone. Okay, let's go. Okay, bit value. So why did I come up with 9? Okay, so remember his threat modifier is 9, and he's a medium creature, so threat mod times 1 is still 9. That's why I came up with that. Okay, so his bit value is 9. Okay, how much EP does he have? So how much ether points does he have? Is he worth, right? Okay, so before he runs up, or you can absorb if you manage to kill him, which is probably not going to happen, but let's say you do. So I gave him 54 EP. Now how did I come up with 54? Okay, so once again, let's look at the book. And again, this is clinical. I'm just showing you how I'm getting my numbers. I don't just make them up. So EP. So we talked about that. We multiply its threat mod, which is 9, by its base EP being size. So 9 times 8 is a medium creature. See right here, it's 54, right? Now, if you want to multiply those further to show that the character is more developed, the monster is stronger or whatever, you can do that too by up to the amount equivalent to its threat mod score if you want to. But I generally don't need to. Okay, so for all intents and purposes, threat mod times its being size, which is listed here, it gives you the number. That's how I came up with that. So let's see. So EP size multiplier is 8. Okay, I'm just copying this here. It tells you here. So threat mod by 1. Just let's see. I believe that is everything. So there you have it. So this right here, we've just created a xenomorph warrior. Now, what's really cool is if you're creating creatures that are similar to each other, then just use one sheet as your basic template, and then just copy it over and make some changes to it. So let's say I want to create the spitter alien, right? I would simply use this template and change the attacks around, right? So with the spitter, okay, the spitter can do all these, but he's also going to have the spitting attack, right? Spits acid out, like we've seen in Alien 2, the aliens, right? You can melt this guy's face off, right? Given that attack, but also, for the sake of balance, maybe take something out here. So maybe he's probably if I were creating a spitter, just as an example, I would probably take out from the techniques, I would probably take out running strike or execution, or I would probably take out these to compensate for the spitting attack. So it's up to you how you balance things out, what you give, what you take. That's entirely up to you. But there you have it. We have a Xenomorph Warrior we've created using the rules and mechanics in the Glyphs RPG blueprint. So have fun with it and come up with your own. Like I said, each campaign session you should have at least 3 to ideally 5 creatures created, which is part of your regular prep work anyways. That's the biggest part of my prep work, goes into creating monsters that I think very carefully about in the setting to throw my people off, so they're not expecting the same creature every time. So, and they're not just looking into a book saying, oh, I read the monster manual, I know what you're going to come up with. Right. That's a nice thing about doing it this way. So that's all for that. So stay tuned here shortly. I'm going to get my voice back, and or try to get my voice back, and then we're going to play around with a little bit of the random gen for creature creation. Thanks. I'm going to conclude the entities chapter tutorial by the entity creation process. So we've had a great time creating our own scratch just here a while ago, but now let's say that I'm not inspired by any particular monster, or I've read enough mythology books and I'm just really tired of it, right? I just want to create something completely from scratch, and I just want to randomly create something out of thin air, right? So as we all know, the more random we get, the more odd things get, maybe disproportionate, but that's okay. That's what's neat about random, right? So I have a nice list of 9 different things we're going to consider when we randomize a creature. Okay, so you can, like anything here, you can only use one of them at a time, or the entire thing, depending how deep and random you want to go. Okay, so first, let's look at entity class. So what kind of entity are we going to be creating? Okay, for that we're going to be using the OmniGrid's letter clues. Okay, so like usual, get 3, maybe even up to 5 clues. Whatever comes to mind first is your answer. So here, let's take a look. Okay, it's purely random. Okay, let's say that was M. Okay. And let's see, that one tells me 1. Let's do 1 more. Kind of narrow it down there. Okay, D. Let's go with D. Okay, so that took me a while to generate my letter clues. Normally it goes a lot quicker, but out of all those that I got 2 useful ones. I got M and I got D. So right off the bat, that tells me humanoid, right? So see all these ones that I just did. Okay, normally only a few you need to have to do, but in this case, our topics are more limited, so that's why I had to go through more. So M and D comes to mind for humanoid, right? So let's go to humanoid, let's just say. Now, next, we're going to talk about form profile. Okay, so overall, let's describe this this creature's physical features, right? So the overall profile of its form. Is it slender, corporeal? Is it soft? Is it, heavy, muscular? Those kind of things, right? So for that, we're going to be using the states glyph. So spend the token. Don't worry about the OmniGrid. And interpret. We're going to look at the middle symbols. Now, with these, it's important on which side it falls, because the positive side can be in one thing, the negative side can be in the other. So just want to point that out. So let's just give it a spin here and look at the states glyphs. Okay, so circle, dotted. Okay, and it's on the positive side. So it's soft. So we have a soft humanoid. So it's very soft. Now again, the more details we go into random, the more it can get skewed and really abstract. I keep saying that, but it's true. So you'll see what I mean here, but let's just have some fun with it. There's no right or wrong answer here. Likeness. Now, likeness is an optional step, okay? If you need to create something that object, using your mind's eye to kind of create a likeness of something, you can use letter clues for that too. Now in this case, is a humanoid, it wouldn't make sense to me to create it in a likeness of an animal. Or maybe you could blend them together, right? You know what? Let's do that just for the sake of doing it, because we can do anything with this system, right? We're going to create a humanoid, a very soft physique, I guess you could say, and he's going to have some animalistic characteristics, let's just say. So one animal that comes to mind, okay, with an H. Okay, no, doesn't tell me much. Let's do it again. Okay, X. Fox. Okay, X. Right off the bat, I think of a fox, right? So, fox. So that's my clue. So we have a humanoid, very soft overall form profile, who sort of has the likeness of a fox. Okay, very odd creature, as we already can see, right? Okay, any notable features that we need to know about? So, and the more random, the more weird we get, but let's have fun. So, any distinguishing features that set it apart. Okay, so tentacles, special limbs, wings, things like that, right? So, we're going to use the states glyphs again, and again, in this situation also, depending on what side it falls on, which face is going to determine these. So, you're going to see these on page 418 and 419. Okay, as you're doing this randomly, those are good pages to refer to show you, because this is going to be an odd process, but it's a lot of fun. I mean, you can go to town all day with this, just be creating monsters at random. Okay, so notable features. Let's spin here and look at the states glyphs. Enter symbol for an answer, and guess what? From my perspective, these two are level, but I'm going to go with a triangle, okay? And it's on the negative side. So he has horns, okay? So, and it kind of makes sense. You know, look at it. It's pointed, and the electrical symbols are kind of sharp. So in this context, horns come to mind, right? On the negative side. If it's positive side, you could say it's got something with its mouth, very sharp, big teeth or something. But in this case, horns. So he's got horns. So guess what? Now we get into entity size. So simply spin. And we're going to use the polarity glyphs, and we're going to interpret size just like we normally do through a size range. Triple S being the smallest, triple L being the largest, and the polarity glyphs correspond. So X would be, you know, medium, and so forth. So let's spin. So I got double negative for size. Okay, this is very weird looking. So double negative is an SS creature. So not the smallest, but pretty small, right? You're already starting to get a picture here of how it's starting to shape up. So polarity, same process, except the polarity glyphs read it just for what it is. And it's an X, so he's neutral. Okay, texture and color. So let's see how detailed we want to get. What color is this guy? And texture. So for this, you could do it in 2 separate steps, or you could just do it in 1 step to save you time. It doesn't matter. So we're going to get a nice spin in here, and we're going to look at the color that it falls on the OmniGrid, and we're going to look at the results from the states glyph to see what kind of texture this guy has. Okay, so again, the face that it lands on can determine what it. Page 419, you'll see what I mean. Okay, so for color, it's navy blue. So maybe navy blue fur. Okay, very soft, squishy creature. Okay, and for the states glyphs, let's just say that I spun and got the triangle, so the electrical wavy line, and on the positive side, so very prickly texture. So very odd. So maybe almost like a porcupine, right? So a lot of odd characteristics kind of blended together in this creature, but I don't have the ability to draw very good, so I'm not going to draw for this tutorial, but just focus on your mind's eye, what you're starting to see, and those of you artists out there should be able to do it in no time, okay? Primary function. Okay, let's talk about that. What is this guy's primary function? So in combat, or in life in general, how does this creature handle, right? What is his main purpose, okay? So for that, we're going to be using the function glyphs. And again, it's face sensitive. Positive or negative is going to have an effect. So in this case, the wrench is skill set, okay? And we are on the positive face. So this creature is very skill driven. So this creature is likely to behave more, not so much as an upfront fighter, but he's somebody that more focuses on skills or probably avoids combat entirely. Okay, and he's very neutral in polarity, so we know that. So we're starting to get a nice profile here. So when you're creating this creature, you want to give him skills, you know, a set of skills that are useful to his existence, not just random skills, right? Okay, so attributes. Now, attributes are pretty funny. So first, when we talk about random attributes, we got to find out if they're even, wild, augmented, or epic. So for intelligence, essence, and physique, we have to do this process. So physique, and then essence, or intelligence, and then essence. So those are the three types of attributes we have, right? That's in the attributes chapter. So for physique, spin, and we're going to look at the states glyphs. Okay, so for physique, and again, this is on page 419 for your reference, but I got the circle, so that's augmented. So that is a multiplier of 3, okay? For intelligence, I have, the circle again, okay? And then, so augmented. And then essence, the circle again, okay. Now, let me just take a look real quick here at attributes and check my attribute modifiers to make sure I got them correct, the multipliers. So for physique, the multiplier is 3. For intelligence, it's also 3. And for essence, it's 2. So let me make sure I got this right, because we're going to do some number crunching. Now, let me go back here to my notes. And we're going to play some numbers. Let me just get back to my notes here. Okay, so now that we have, see my chicken scratch here, a lot of notes here, and we're going to put it all together. So attributes, so for physique we have augmented, intelligence, same thing, essence, same thing, and these are the multipliers for 3, 3, 2. So now we got to rate them themselves. So now we're going to look at element glyphs. So I've said this many times, the element glyphs should have a numerical ranking from 1 to 4. Carbon being 1, fire being 2, water being 3, air being 4. Okay, so that's going to come important when we do numbers, okay, for small calculations. So I'm going to spin. Okay, and fire. So fire has a value of 2. Okay, so let's say I'm doing strength, right? Strength is a prime attribute. So strength for physique is 2 times 3 is 6, right? Let's just say, and you'd have to do this for each one of the attributes. Like I said, it is time consuming, but if you want to randomize something, that's the time you'll have to spend to do it. If you really want to spend time creating monsters from scratch, but if not, don't spend the time. But that's just my take on that, okay? So for intelligence, let's say I'm doing IQ. Let's say I want to know about a random IQ. In this case. And it's water. So water has a value of 3. So 3 times 3 is 9. So he has a 9 IQ. And for essence, let's say I do it again. I spin, and I'm looking at the element glyphs. And carbon. So let's say he has a wisdom of 1. Times 2 is 2. Okay, and like I said, each attribute you would have to do this for, but I'm just giving you strength, IQ, and wisdom very clinically just to show you how I got them. So that's it. So these are all the parameters that I'm looking at. So let's put this all together. Again, the letter clues took me a little longer than I would have liked them to, but again, the idea is for that to jog your mind into giving you something completely random that works. In this case, M and D. Humanoid. Okay, so let's talk about this creature that we have. We have all these variables here. Okay, as a starting point. The token only gives you clues and a nice starting point. Some of the stuff you'll have to flesh out on your own based on what you need for your setting and so forth. But we know for a fact this is a humanoid. Okay, his form is very soft, maybe squishy, right? His overall physique, right? He has a likeness of a fox, so he's got some fox-like features. Maybe his face kind of resembles a fox. Maybe he's got a fox tail. Okay, notable features, he's got horns. So not only does he look like a soft, squishy humanoid fox, he's got horns, right? He's SS, so he's a small creature, pretty small, maybe the size, of a basketball, a little bit bigger, roughly. Okay. His polarity, he's neutral. Okay. So his texture and color, his overall hide, I guess you could say, is very prickly. Maybe it's got like, what am I thinking? Like porcupine needles on it or something. Maybe it's just very prickly to the touch. And it's got like a dark navy blue color to it. Okay. His primary life goal, I guess, is to focus on his skills. So he kind of keeps to himself. Maybe he builds stuff. Maybe that's the kind of stuff he does. You don't really know, but that's for you to decide as the architect. So he's very skill set driven. That's his main function, right? Attributes we just did. So first for attributes, like I said, determine, if they're augmented, if they're even, wild, or epic, and then you generate the numbers. So this guy has a 6 for strength, a 9 for IQ, and a 2 for wisdom. So take your time, absorb these clues, and that'll give you a really good picture as to the monster that we just created completely randomly. Now, after that, like I said, this is just a reference point to start. It's up to you how to assign how he attacks, how he lives, and all the rest of the details you need to flesh out. But as you can see, this is a very powerful way to create something completely from random, right visually in your mind's eye, instead of just looking at lists of traits. So Glyphs is very much about experimenting and exploring and seeing what you can do for yourself. So thank you for your time. We are almost done with this tutorial. We've only got a couple chapters left. So yeah, have fun with this chapter and see what kind of creatures and concoctions that you can come up with.